every physical body is different. Every plant body is different. And then everybody's issues are different. So, to have these blanketed responses to what's a good fit for people, it just doesn't make sense.
Welcome to High on Self-Care. I'm your host, Stacey Zeal, yoga teacher, crystal lover, high-functioning stoner, and CEO of MaryZeal.com, a community for stoners who love cannabis and are looking to prioritize their self-care. On this podcast, we'll explore ways that meditation, mindfulness, yoga, and of course, all things weed can help you to elevate your self-care. We'll explore ways to truly value ourselves, use stillness for self-discovery, and cannabis to go higher on our journey. Think of me as your sister stoner who lovingly encourages you to prioritize yourself and reap the benefits of this magical plant. If you're ready to create a life that holds space for your most valuable asset, that's you, by the way, take a deep breath, light your J, and let's dive in. All right, y'all. Welcome back to another episode of High on Self-Care. I am your host, Stacey Zeal, and as always, I'm super excited that you are here checking out this episode today. I have another awesome guest, and y'all, guess what? We found out we grew up right around the corner from each other. I'm excited to talk to someone on the podcast who is from Baltimore, who could definitely speak to the cannabis situation here. So she is a cannabis nurse, the founder of Cannabis Nursing Solutions, advisors for cannabis nurses of color, and the author of the children's book, Aces Medicine. So welcome to the show, Ashley. How are you today?
Hey, I'm good. Thanks for the wonderful introduction, if I could speak properly.
Yeah, well, thanks for being here. I'm super excited to talk. Let's start with you telling us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and how you kind of got here.
My name's Ashley. I am working as a cannabis nurse. Is not a true specialty in the profession as yet, but I identify it. I go by endocannabinoid specialty nurse. But and I'll talk a little bit more about the word endocannabinoid and all that kind of stuff. But really, for me, it's just about getting the word out about cannabis as medicine. In Maryland, cannabis is legal for medical purposes, and anything medical, I feel like nurses should have their hand in. So I have dug deep into what cannabis is as a medicine, how to help people with getting the best results. And for me, it's just about getting that narrative out there. So that's me in a nutshell.
Yeah, I love that. So talk to me a little bit about your transition from traditional nursing, because I'm assuming you started as, traditional nursing, you're an RN. So talk to me about that transition from being in such a more traditional field to then deciding that cannabis was something that was a realm that you wanted to step into with nursing.
I've been a nurse for 13 years. I started off as a med-surg nurse. So, in a hospital, taking care of patients. I have 5 or 6 patients at a time. I worked in what's called telemetry. We looked at monitors on the screen. Ended up getting my master's degree in nursing education because I like precepting nurses and just educating and talking and telling people new things and, seeing that light spark and all that kind of stuff. So that's what led me to get my master's degree in nursing education. And that's when a lot of doors opened up in like leadership positions for me. I was asked to help build a transition to practice program for new graduate RNs. I built like a preceptor program. I did all these, really cool things, right? I never really thought that I would have the chance to do it. And, and it still grew from there, right? I ended up in corporate. I ended up working for a 12 hospital system with very little diversity in there, very already baked in culture that didn't seem to want to shift. So working in like process improvement, quality and data analytics and, all these things and making this big income. And I was like, oh girl, I made it. And I was like, I am not happy. Like I can't, and I know people tell this story and they're like, I just wasn't happy and I knew it just had to change. And it kind of waters down what that really meant for me. But like at the time when I was doing that, it was such a conflict for me because, I had everything that the world said I was supposed to want to have. And there was still something just not sitting right with me. Like it wasn't really anywhere else for me to go or grow and I'm like, I'm not going to spend 20 years doing this. battling with my personal moral standards, right? So I was like, there has to be something on the other side of this. So I just started digging around. Around that time, I was the victim of cyber fraud and theft. And that was a jolt for me to kind of wake me up and say, okay, you need to do something. You need to put action behind what it is you're thinking here. As difficult as that time was, I'm also very thankful for it because I don't think I would have done a lot of the stuff that I've done. So anyway, fast forward, I decided that I was going to get some, we had a medical program here. I think it was December 2017. We implemented our medical program for cannabis. And I was like, okay, there's medical in front of the word cannabis. Nurses have to have something to do with that, right? Like we can't go on forever without nurses having nothing to do with it. So that's when I started my research and I created a course, mostly as a way to conceptualize all my thoughts around what I had learned, really to kind of structure everything so that way it's repeatable, like other nurses could learn what I know and, apply it to their practice as well. And from there, it just kind of grew, like it's, word of mouth kind of thing, inspired action. I wrote the children's book, Aces Medicine, people having faith in what it is that I had to offer. So just being given opportunities to speak with different groups of people, to be in these advisory roles and support nonprofits and like just all types of stuff. I help with guidelines here in Maryland that allows cannabis in schools. And it just goes on. I have a hard time now even summing up everything that I've had the opportunity to do because it happened in such a short period of time. It's almost unbelievable. That's the journey. Obviously, there's way more to the journey to come and a lot more detail that happened during that transition period. But yeah, that's what happened.
Yeah, I love that. And one of the things that I kind of pulled from that and kind of took from that is that, you were saying that you were unhappy and that you were unfulfilled and that you chose to make a pivot and you had to find something that lights you up. Because I think that that's so important to point out to people, because I know specifically for me as well, like I've been in careers and roles and stuff that I just, they were great at first. And then it's like, it's not so fun anymore. It's not fulfilling anymore. I know there's something else out there. Like, I feel like I want to be making a bigger impact in a different kind of way. And so I think that is so important for people to, take a time to sit with where you're at now, especially now we're in the last quarter of the year. Like, we only got a few months left to really figure out how we can make this year our best year yet. So really kind of start to think about like, what is it that in your life, are you happy with where you're at, right? Like think about your career. Are you happy with your job? Are you happy with that industry? And so I think that that's just so, commendable that you recognize that you had to make a pivot, because so many people will not. So many people will, just stay in a place that they're unhappy just because it's comfortable. So yeah, that's great. So one of the things I wanted to talk about on your site and in your bio and stuff like that, you said that through evidence standardization and change management, Nurse Wynn Grimes plans to fundamentally alter the way healthcare providers view medical cannabis. So why is it important for us for the healthcare providers and the system and all that kind of stuff to really start to alter the way that they view medical cannabis?
Because right now they don't. They ignore it.
Love that.
I already did all of that. Okay, so I mentioned I worked in med-surg. So what happened when I worked on the floor? You get a tox screen, you get or a urine screen, which included a tox screen, and you would get the results back from the tox screen, and you would look through the results and see if there was anything you need to tell the doctor about the person's tox screen. We never looked at the cannabinoid profile. Nobody ever tells me nobody ever taught me that the cannabinoid profile was something that I should consider, even think about. I pretty much ignored it, to be honest with you, because it wasn't an actionable thing. You know what I mean? It didn't trigger a treatment care plan, because like whenever we see certain data points on a person's profile, we're like, oh, okay, I see that your hemoglobin is low. So now I know that you're probably going to need, a blood transfusion, or now I know that, you know what I mean? Like you start with data point A and then it takes you to wherever you're going to go down the pipeline. When we see certain things, it's like, you do stuff. But when we see cannabinoid profiles, we don't do anything. And so that's on an individual basis. So the general nurse isn't gonna, take any time to ask any questions. We do an assessment every time we meet a patient. Is interview technique that every nurse is supposed to do, and we don't take the time to ask them about why they're using their cannabis, how they're choosing to consume their cannabis, if there are any other herbs, or, because if that person's open to cannabis, likely they're open to other herbs and ways of healing themselves, right? And medications, the things that we give them interact with the body, and so does the cannabinoid. Like there's a whole system called the endocannabinoid system that we don't even talk about, acknowledge, or understand how it works. And if we're the person who's responsible for calling the doctor to say, hey, doc, X, Y, and Z, and it's not, that communication's not happening, the doc isn't gonna come through and be like, oh, so I seen that you're toxic, because they're not looking at that. We look at that. We're the ones that put up the red flag and say, oh my gosh, the patient has this going on, because the doctors are, that's not their role. I'll just put it that way. So, yeah.
What does the endocannabinoid profile then tell you? So let's say you're looking at it. What does that then tell you about a patient? For us, I would say, I guess, let's go into the endocannabinoid system a little bit and talk about what it is and how it works. And then talk about what are some things that profile would tell you that me as a consumer would need to pay attention to.
So the endocannabinoid system is an endogenous system that is a neuroreceptor system, right? So there are neurons that connect with specific compounds. And in the case of a normal functioning body, it would be an endocannabinoid, meaning that we create our own cannabinoids that bind to this neuroreceptor system. A lot of us, due to stress and fight or flight system and all that kind of stuff, we have a lack of endocannabinoids anyway. We're endocannabinoid deficient. That's why a lot of people, knowingly or not knowingly, are replacing those cannabinoids with phytocannabinoids, which is found in the plant. A phytocannabinoid, an example of that is like THC and CBD. There are over 100 of them. So what those phytocannabinoids do when they enter the body is they bind to that neuroreceptor system. The whole purpose of that neuroreceptor system, the endocannabinoid system, is to create balance. That said, every cannabinoid interacts with the body differently. So we talk about THC, we talk about CBD, we talk about CBN, CBG, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And when those cannabinoids enter the body, the goal is to create balance, but not everybody responds to all the cannabinoids the same. You see what I'm saying? So to answer your question about the cannabinoid profile, it doesn't always break down all the cannabinoids that's in it, because again, there's a lot more work to be done as far as what information is available to us. But if you are consuming cannabis, I can at least say, hi, I see you're consuming cannabis. Why do you take cannabis? How do you take your cannabis? You see what I'm saying? So it doesn't have to be a super technical change. It just has to be an acknowledgement of where that patient is and the potential for interactions with the cannabinoids in the body.
That's super interesting and super important, I think, because, if we have a system within our body, right, that's controlling so many other things like sleep and appetite and all that kind of stuff, right? You would want to be able to talk to your doctor about and consuming cannabis. I know for me, for a long time when they asked oh, do you smoke anything or do you get, I'm just no. And then, at this point now, I'm just well, I'm a medical patient here in Maryland. If you ask me if I have weed in my system, I'm like, yes, I have lots of weed in my system. What kind of weed did we talk about? You want me to let you know what I consumed today? And so I have made that shift myself just because I feel as a medical patient, at least there's some kind of protections, right? Because I am a medical patient, right? I have a medical card. And so, but I think that, it's just so important to be able to talk to your doctor just about your use. And like you said, earlier, if you're open to cannabis, maybe you're open to other herbs and other things that may help you with healing. And that's so key too, because it's I would prefer, you give me something natural than give me something with pills. Like, for example, for me, I started smoking weed because I have insomnia. And, I went down the whole rabbit hole of trying to cut caffeine and cut sugar and try all the things and tried melatonin, and melatonin just didn't work for me. Then I did sleeping pills from a doctor, and I did, at that point I didn't smoke weed, but he prescribed me sleeping pills. They only worked for 2 weeks. I grew up a tolerance to them, and then they just stopped working. And I'm just like, well, what am I supposed to do now? And he said, well, you can take the pills for 2 weeks and then not take it for 2 weeks and then take it for 2 weeks. And I'm like, well, that's not really a solution to my problem. That sounds like a Band-Aid. So I think that it's just it's important, because like, if he had just said like, hey, maybe you should try weed, or maybe you should try cannabis or in some capacity, that would have opened my eyes up a lot sooner, because I ended up just saying, no, thank you. I don't want to do the whole Band-Aid situation. So I'm just going to figure something else out. And so I just started Googling again and figuring out how else can I help with my sleep. And I just kind of happened to come across a blog that had cannabis. It was like a list of 15 things to help you with sleep. And the very last thing was weed. And I was like, well, you know what? Let me try it. And, it changed my life, literally, and now I get consistent sleep. Now I sleep every night. And I think that, that's just so key. Like what you said about, if you can talk to your doctor about it, then they can offer you something as an alternative to a pill, because maybe you're not comfortable with that. So what made you decide to really kind of get involved with Maryland specifically? Like, I want to talk about Maryland specifically, because now I have someone here who is actually from Maryland, from Baltimore, who, works in the healthcare system here and has experience in the healthcare system here. So how does the medical patient program work for anyone who is curious about getting their card in Maryland? And why is it important, I think, for people who are in Maryland to consider getting their medical card? Like, why would we even consider getting it when, we can just get it from other places?
First, you have to register with the Maryland Medical Cannabis Commission. So that just lets them know that you're interested in becoming a patient. Obviously, they need a fee. Maryland never does anything without money. And then, right. They need an image of you, because it is still federally legal. So they have to make sure that they have captured your information just for the purpose of, identifying you as a patient here in Maryland, right? And then you go to a provider who's able to certify, which, by the way, if anybody is interested, I do have a provider that can help you get access to cannabis here. But you go to a doctor, they'll sit down with you. The not so good doctors will just do a certification off the bat and just be like, here, go on about your way. And you can pretty much in the next 48 hours be able to get your card, or a temporary card. You can go into the dispensary. It depends on how backed up they are, because sometimes they backed up. A really good doctor or nurse practitioner will be able to sit down with you, have a discussion about what cannabinoids are a good fit for you, educate you on the chemical compounds within the plant so you can make good decisions, and then talk to you about the different methods of consumption. When you go into these dispensaries, it can be overwhelming. And especially if you're not familiar with cannabis all by yourself, like if this is like your first go around, or if you only ever had flower and you walk in and you're like, oh, it's dabs and it's waxes and it's this and it's that. Well, how do I choose what I want? And then it's all these different brands on top of that. So some brands have really colorful packaging and you're like, oh, I'm drawn to it just because of the colorful packaging, and it's trash. The nurse practitioner will be able to sit down with you, talk to you about those different things, give you a little bit of guidance on how to choose your stuff. When you get into the dispensary, you'll also run into what's called a bud tender. The unfortunate reality about our bud tenders, I love them to death. They are working people and they're beautiful people. But the unfortunate reality is they do not understand your medical condition. And most likely they are consumers themselves. So they're only offering advice based on their experience. And which is why, again, nursing is so important, because, like I said, if you have that good provider that certifies you, they can sit down and talk to you about all the things you need to know. So when you ask the bud tender, you can ask direct pointed questions as opposed to, what should I get today? But the other piece of it is, because of the role in a traditional setting, the RN has the ability to educate and advise and consult with patients. So that way, even if your doctor doesn't necessarily give you all the information you need, because that's generally not their role, the nurse can be that segue in between.
Hey, y'all. I wanted to jump in and tell you about one of my favorite ways to unwind after a long day over here on Team Mary Zeal, other than a joint. After a crazy day, we love to unwind with a yummy cup of hot CBD tea from Twin Flame Tea Company. In fact, when I started on my journey into CBD, this is one of the first products I tried and I love it. Twin Flame Tea Company makes organic, herbal, hand-blended loose leaf tea that contains hemp, so you can get your daily dose of CBD in addition to the relaxation, y'all. My personal favorite is their You Need to Calm Down Chamomile Peppermint Hemp Infused Tea. So head over to maryzeal.com/twinflametea to see all their yummy flavors and get on this CBD train.
All right. So thanks again for giving us all that great information about, how the process. Because I think some people are a little intimidated by the process, right? Like I remember, for me, I came from when I started smoking weed, I was living in Las Vegas and it was recreational there. So I could just walk into a dispensary and, just get whatever I wanted and just go. I didn't need a card. You didn't need, you just had to be 21. And now here, I went through and kind of researched the process and figured out how to get it done, get my card and stuff like that. I love being able to go into a dispensary personally, because I love to be able to, I like options. I like to be able to say like, okay, I have a whole lot of options. I like to be able, like, I've been more trying into different like dabs and concentrates and getting more into different things that you don't necessarily find regularly. And I think, it's so important that you talk about how if you have like a specific medical condition or something that you really want to treat, you talk to a nurse or you talk to, someone who is experienced in the field, because the bud tenders, they are great and they have a lot of great information, but you're right. They talk about from their experience, right? There have been times when I would say, oh, have you tried this? And they're like, oh, no, I haven't tried that yet. Or yeah, I've tried it and I liked it, but then maybe I don't like it, because it works differently in my body. So how is it that we have those different types of experiences? Could you go into a little bit about, because we talked about, when you get stuff that doesn't work for you or you're getting someone based on someone else's experience, like how is that possible, one, I guess, and what are some tips for people who are maybe going for their first time and they're trying to figure out, what to get for them specifically?
Yeah. So just to go back, I forgot to answer part of your question too on the last piece. So the reason why it's important to go to a dispensary is because, especially here in Maryland, it's tested. Your stuff isn't dipped in bleach. It's not sprinkled with fentanyl. And for me, that's the biggest piece of it. If you're going to consume, I don't care if you smoke all day, every day. If you're going to use it, and I feel that way about any drug out here, if you're going to use it, know what's in it. If you want to use heroin, know that it's heroin and not heroin and fentanyl, because you'll kill yourself that way. Caveat on that. But
no, that's really important for sure. Because I think that a lot of people don't realize that, like, especially even if it's not like, something like bleach or fentanyl or something like that, maybe it's mold, right? Like, because when you go to the dispensary, they test it. Like if somebody's plant got mold on it, that's going to get into your body and you're going to consume that. And that's going to, that's going to mess you up. So yeah, super important.
If anybody takes anything away from that's what you need to take away. To go back to the last question about why it affects everybody differently. So what you're dealing with is plant genetics, right? Like every plant has its own genetic profile, which is the cannabinoids, the terpenes, and all that kind of stuff. And every plant is different. It doesn't matter if it's the same strain. Like twins, the twins look the same, but there are genetic differences that sometimes are physically obvious and sometimes it's just not, but it's still differences. That said, we're also dealing with individualized genetic physical human profiles. You see what I'm saying? And when the plant interacts with the body, you're dealing with those differences generally. In addition to that, how are your symptoms presenting and why? Right. So if sleep is your issue, am I not going to sleep well? Am I waking up in the middle of the night? Am I not having a quality sleep? Like sleep is an issue for a lot of people, but you can have 3 people and have 3 different issues that you're dealing with. You see what I'm saying? So to recommend, OG Kush to every patient that's saying I have trouble sleeping, it just doesn't make sense. Maybe person A may do well with flower, person B might do good with tincture, Person C might do well with the concentrate because it's not really the sleep that's the problem. It's really some, epilepsy, let's say. You see what I'm saying? And you need that high THC content to get it under control. Every physical body is different. Every plant body is different. And then everybody's issues are different. So, to have these blanketed responses to what's a good fit for people, it just doesn't make sense.
And I remember specifically, I remember the first time I tried cannabis to help me sleep. And so, because that's why I originally turned to it in the first place, because I'm like, I have insomnia. I fell asleep driving, and it was like, okay, bitch, you need to take this shit seriously. Right. And you need to fix this insomnia thing. And I love that you mentioned that it affects, people have different problems. The reason that people sleep, are not sleeping is different. And so for me, I found the reason that I can't sleep is because I can't turn my mind off, right? Like my mind is always going, whether I'm stressed out or not. Like my mind is just going. It just, she just likes to talk and she likes to keep me up at night. But then I remember when I went to the dispensary for the first time, the bud tender recommended an indica strain because he was like, oh yeah, we recommend indica for sleep, because I told him like, hey, I need something for sleep. He said, this is what we tell people for sleep. And I said, okay, well, because I'm extra, I need you to give me an indica and a sativa and a hybrid, because I need everything. Just give me three.
Yeah.
Yeah, I need to try all of it. And so he's like, so, get everything. And I go home and I try the indica like he recommended before sleep, and it didn't help me sleep. I kind of was just laying there feeling heavy, and it gave me a little bit more, like indica strains for me give me a little bit more of anxiety, because I feel like my body can't move and my head is moving. And so that gives me anxiety. And so I realized that night that I kind of was just laying there. My body felt great. Like it felt relaxed. It was heavy, but I still couldn't sleep. And so I tried it a couple times, realized like, okay, this is, there's something to it. Cause I'm like, I feel great and I feel relaxed, but I'm not sleeping, but I'm like, there has to be something here. And so I ended up trying the sativa strain before bed. And that is what helps me sleep. Like for even now to this day, like I rarely ever buy indica strains because they just, like I said, they give me anxiety for just feeling, stuck. And so before bed, I look for things that have like pinene in it, because that helps me focus. Like I realize I need to just be able, like my mind needs to just be able to focus on one thing, or like, some strains like will turn my thoughts to more like white noise kind of, and that helps me to sleep. And so it's so important, like you were saying, to identify like, why is it that you can't sleep? Is it because you have pain and that's keeping you awake? Because then maybe you will need an indica strain that'll help you with pain, or something with a lot of myrcene in it that'll help you with the pain. Or, like me, it's because I can't turn my mind off. Do you need something that'll help you to turn your mind off and help you to, just relax? So it's really, really important, for each person, I would say, that's listening, to really start with self, like figure out like, why do I want, what do I need cannabis for? Like, cause then I feel like that, you can then make a more informed decision about what to try and different ways to consume. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it's super important. In fact, I recommend that people take notes about it. Like I have a journal on my website, and, like just so you can have it all together. And even if you don't this is not a pitch to sell. The only reason why it's beneficial is because it's all together and it's binded, right? That's what it's for. It's perfect for that, right? But even if you took little pieces of paper and just stacked them on top of each other and followed the trend, like you found out that pinene worked for you. For somebody else, it may not work for you or for them. You know what I mean? And because there's so many different terpenes, like, do I need more pinene or do I need more myrcene? You see what I'm saying? Like, do I need like equal parts CBD and THC, because I need higher doses of THC, but I don't want to feel high all day. So it's about kind of playing with what the options are out there. And again, going back to your last question, one of the things that I recommend for people when they do go, don't buy a bunch of one thing. You get it exactly perfect. Get a little bit of everything and try everything in a strategic manner. Like, don't sit there and be like, I'm gonna try this, I'm gonna try that, I'm gonna try this.
Right.
I'm going to put this picture under my tongue and then I'm gonna eat that. Right. Don't do that. But maybe take a week and say, okay, well, I'm going to try flour at night, and that didn't work. Maybe I'll try flour during the day, or maybe I should combust it and use tincture. Like, start to kind of play around with what works better and follow the trend over time. And for a lot of people, it might take 6 to 9 months to really get a good solid routine. And then on top of that, your body starts to get used to it, and you still got to change it up.
Yeah. And another reason I guess I love dispensaries is because, they have sales and they have deals and they have loyalty programs. At least the ones here in Maryland and Vegas did. And so just so you know, if you're missing out on being a medical patient, they have lots of sales and specials. But so I like sometimes you'll find yourself saying like, oh, let me buy a bunch of this because it's on sale, right? Or because they're having some kind of special. But really, like for me, when I go to try something new, because I have my strains that I'm like I know typically work for me, like Bruce Banner, me and Bruce get along real good. He helps me sleep. And then I have like my mimosa that helps me during the day and it's just making me feel all bubbly and excited. But I find that when I'm trying something new, I will go for just like a gram. Like I'm like, let me just buy a gram of something, try this, or let me buy a pre-roll to try it because, you don't want to get stuck with a bunch of stuff that you just don't like. And I made that mistake.
Like, hair products, you got the whole drawer full of stuff and you ain't gonna use
exactly, right? Bought the whole damn collection and the shit that started to make your hair fall out. Like, come on. Like so yeah, it's the same thing with your weed, y'all. Like treat it just like you would treat your hair products. Let me tell you, because it's so different for everybody. And I think that's one of the things I definitely had to learn when I was first starting out. Is just like this affects everybody differently, and everybody uses it for so many different things. And it's such a great plant, y'all. So if you're a little scared to come in, I think you should definitely talk to Ashley for sure and talk to her about, your ailments and stuff like that. And I love that you have a journal. You're perfectly okay to pitch on this podcast. So please make sure y'all check out her journal. And y'all know I love journaling. So I'm definitely going to check it out as well. Because again, that is important to just like document. If you're someone who needs to like document like how something makes you feel, do it, right? This is your practice. This is your wellness journey, so just make sure that you're taking the steps necessary for you to experience the amazingness of this plant.
At minimum, enjoy it. Like it shouldn't be stressful. Like this, like if you want to be stressed out, you should just go ahead and take whatever the doctor prescribed for you, because this is not like cannabis medicine. Cannabis as what it is intended to be relaxing. So at minimum, if you could just relieve your stress level by, interacting with this plant, however you choose to do it,
Yeah. Yeah, we definitely and we're in such stressful times, y'all. Like, let's not, pretend that we are in normal times. Like we are not in normal times. So if, I know my consumption has gone up dramatically for sure. And so release that kind of shame around that. Like if you're using a lot of weed, release that shame. Cause I do have people that talk to me about that too. Like they'll say like, oh, I'm smoking a lot of weed or I'm using a lot. And it makes me feel a little self-conscious. And I'm like, I understood that because I felt that way when I first started out too. But I realized that this is something that's helping me, and getting enough sleep and meditating, and being real, in the moment when I'm meditating and doing my yoga and stuff like that. That's important. That's key for me to be, to be me. It's key for me to operate at my best, to pour into myself. And that's why we talk so much about self-care on this podcast, because it really is, important to just pour into yourself. And whether your self-care includes cannabis or it doesn't, that's completely up to you. All my self-care happens to, have a real good relationship with cannabis. We get along real great when we mix the two together. So that's just one of the things I recommend for people. So I want to talk about your book, because you have a children's book, and tell me about the book. Let's start with telling me about the book and tell me what inspired you to write the book.
So it's called Ace's Medicine. It's about a little boy. He moves to Maryland and because he needs to take his medicine. And the reason why he moved to Maryland is because Maryland has a law that allows children access to cannabis medicine in school. So he goes to school and he meets his new class and he loves it and he's very excited. He raises his hand. He's like, I have to go take my cannabis. And everybody's like, what? Somebody bullies him, and he ends up going to a school nurse, and him and his school nurse come back and they teach the class about cannabis.
Oh, that's lovely.
Yeah. So the reason why I wrote it, though, or why I felt like it was important to write it, is because we actually do have a law here in Maryland that allows children access to their cannabis in schools. And I helped write the guidelines, or worked on a work group to write the guidelines that supports the law or the bill that passed. Doing that work was very enlightening in a lot of ways, and I won't go into the details of that. and I will say the guidelines are well written. Like, I'm not going to question that piece of it, but there are aspects that can't be covered in guidelines or, like legislative type, work or whatever. I don't know what it's called, but, and just being a nurse, I always take the patient's perspective. And in this case, it's a student who's in school. And then as a mom, I'm also considering the children because I also have children. So, when this child comes to school and has this long-term illness, because most likely they've been sick for a long time, their quality of life or their lifetime has not been, anything that we expect a child's life to be able to, that they deserve to have. So, it's traumatic for the child. It's traumatic for the parent. And then here you are trying to have as normal of a life as possible after you discovered this medicine that now fixes whatever didn't fix it, after that. And now they're interacting with the children in public, right? Why should they be shamed for saving their own lives or their parents choosing to save their lives for them? So why should they be shamed for that? And who's teaching these teachers about cannabis and how to interact with these children? Who's teaching the nurses, the school nurses, about how to interact with these children, how to educate these children? Because again, we're not being taught that in nursing school. It's a nice storyline that kind of pulls in all of those talking points just to start the conversation. Like, where do we go from here?
Yeah. It's such an important conversation to have, I think, especially as we get closer to legalization federally and everywhere. And I think Maryland will eventually be recreational because I really don't see anyone where we're at now going backwards. So I think, it's important for us as adults to recognize that by the time our kids get older, and I have a 2-year-old nephew, and it's like, by the time they get to the point where they're making decisions and in school and talking about stuff, weed is probably going to be federally legal at some, at that point. And it's going to be more highly accessible. So I think it's so important to talk to kids about it and, and just to let them know what it is, the power of it, and how to just properly educate themselves. And I love that you took the angle in your book of teaching them, acceptance of other kids, because other kids have, medical conditions, whether they use cannabis for it or not. It's about being accepting and loving and educating yourself on that. So how do we then talk to children in our lives? Like, what are some tips for parents and, our aunties and uncles and stuff out there that have some kids that are growing up outside of getting them the book? Like, what are some ways that we can talk to them about cannabis in the way that they understand?
I'm very, very technical with my kids. So I don't expect the world to be technical. But it's a cannabinoid, and
I love that. First of all, I love little kids that know all the shits. Like, I fucking love that. Let me tell you, tell all the technical stuff. Please educate these people out here. To educate the adults in your lives with the technical terms.
First start, like that's the first step. You need to know for yourself. Like, you need to be able to conceptualize what the plant is for yourself before you could communicate with these children. And at minimum, let them know it's a plant. Let them know that it grows from the ground. Let them know that people use it and there are different ways to use it, as medicine or not as medicine. Like Uncle Johnny comes and he smokes his weed and maybe he's just having a good time. But either way, like, just understand that, it could be a spiritual thing, or, it could be just something to help him cope. And that's the way he chooses to cope. But let's talk about different ways for you to cope. So just kind of giving them the context of, and this is kind of my advice when it comes to children in all respects, is giving them the context, what the concept is, which in this case would be cannabis, and put it in the context of life skills. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Like, how do you choose this for yourself? So if somebody comes to you, you're in, middle school, and somebody comes to you, hey, you want to smoke this? What's your choice going to be? Right? And what's your response going to be? If they're not well at some point, like, let's talk about why this would be a good fit for you. You know what I mean? Like, let's make this part of the general conversation as opposed to the secretive thing. So, because, the issue with a lot of things that we kind of, shy away from, let's talk about sex. You know what I mean? Like, we don't want to talk to our kids about sex, but they still doing it. Mm-hmm. And they're doing it irresponsibly because they don't know. They're allowing other people to teach them. because nobody has given them access to the concept and breaking it down. So when we talk about cannabis, to me, it's the same thing. Like it doesn't have to be a secretive thing. It doesn't, mommy uses this for her medicine. Okay, why, mommy? Like, let them ask you the questions that they got, so that way you can appease their mind, so that way they can move forward knowing that, first of all, mommy is honest. Second of all, I can go out into the world confident that I have all the information I need, so I'm not relying on the world to give it to me. That's a long answer to say, just be honest with your kids.
I love that because it's so key, right? Like I want my nephew to be able to say, like, is it an indica or a sativa? Where'd you get it from? My auntie has good weed, so I'm not smoking that shit on the street. Okay.
Nobody wants what Johnny got from wherever he got it from.
Exactly.
So now it goes back to the point of not knowing what's in your medicine. So your kid's gonna get access to it, however they're gonna get access. You want them to be smart about it. I ain't got time for that. Like you said, I ain't got time for that because that look nasty. Look at that. It got all them seeds.
Right. That don't even smell right.
I
those sticks. Oh my goodness. I want it to be like, what kind, like, is this THC? Is it CBD? What are what's the cannabinoid makeup? Yeah. Because when they're informed, they make better decisions. Like just as people, right? When we're informed, we make better decisions. If I had informed myself about weed a lot sooner, I really feel like I would have fixed my sleep problem way sooner. Right. It was something that, I had always been around weed and, because I've had like my best friend smoked, when we were roommates, and then my partner smoked. So I've always been around weed. I just was like, well, what is it going to do for me? Right. Like I didn't know it was anything that it could do for me. And but if I had realized and educated myself a little sooner and understood that, like, oh, even if I don't want to feel high, there's Delta 8, or if I don't want to feel high, there's CBD, or, and stuff like that. And educating yourself about your endocannabinoid system and how it affects you and what you need to pay attention to and how you can create that balance in your life. So I think it's just so important to really like start with educating yourself, like you said, and then you can properly educate your children and taking that next step. So we have talked about a whole lot today, y'all, and this has been such a great conversation. I want you to just kind of talk to some nurses that were, talk to where you were when you were in the healthcare system and you were considering that transition. What kind of advice do you have for other nurses? And I know we have a lot of nurses, particularly here in Baltimore. Like, what are some advice that you have for them when if they're thinking about a transition and considering getting into the cannabis space?
Just know that it's not an Indeed Google search. Like, you're not gonna find your dream job in this area. Like, this has been a lot of blood, sweat, and tears that have gone into how I present myself today. But if this is something you're truly passionate in and you want to take the entrepreneur route or, work in a dispensary or whatever, those are options for you as well. But in general, I'm not telling nobody quit their day job. Like, if you could just talk about cannabis with your patients, like, I think that will go a long way.
Yeah, love that. Love that. Well, thank you so much, Ashley, for coming on the show. Talk to us about where we can find you online and how we can connect with you if we want to learn more.
So my website is www.cannabisnursingsolutionsllc.com. And sign up for my mailing list because I do updates and things that I don't always post on social media. But Instagram is my favorite avenue. I post on there almost daily. I have a YouTube channel at Cannabis Nursing Solutions. And then you can email me if you have questions, cannabisnursingsolutions@gmail.com.
Awesome, y'all. Well, all of that information will be in the show notes. So head over to maryzeal.com/41. You can check out all of Ashley's information. And thank you again. Thank you so much. This has been such a great conversation, such an enlightening conversation. And we've talked about, definitely went into like the science and all that kind of the research and all kinds of stuff. So thank you so much again for coming on the show.
Yeah, it was fun. Thank you.
Well, that's a wrap on another episode. Thanks so much for listening. If you got a nugget of information or inspiration from this episode, here are 5 ways you can support the podcast. You can buy me a coffee at buyme5coffee.com/high-on-self-care to send your token of appreciation. You can shop Mary Zeal's favorite things. This is a list of products that we love and have actually tried over at maryzeal.com. And some of these products contain affiliate links that give us a kickback when you shop their site at no cost to you. You can leave us a review on your podcast app of choice. If you are listening on the web, be sure to subscribe and leave us a review on the podcast app of choice. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, all the places. Fourth, you can share the podcast with 3 friends that you think would benefit from all the nuggets that we drop. And lastly, you can join my email list to get episodes sent to you weekly and learn about all the fun new things we have coming up on MaryZeal.com and the podcast. All the links are in the description, and I will catch you on the next episode.